Thank you so much. Joyful noise. When Tom and I went to Peru the other week, I shared with you last week, I did the level best that I could to make sure that I had asked as many questions as I could to prepare as best I could for the trip. And by and large, I felt like I did a pretty good job, except there was one area that I felt like I was not properly equipped for or suited to deal with once we got finally to Chupa. Again, this is a town at 13,000 feet. We're below the equator, so their seasons are opposite. So we are summer going into fall. They were winter coming into spring. So it's still chilly, plus you've got the elevation. And so anyway, I was kind of surprised once we got there to discover that it seems like nobody has heat. It was crazy. Even in the town of Juliaca, the night that we spent there, it was in a hotel that actually was new. Looked nice. But there's no heat, and I don't understand that. I can understand if you don't, air conditioning maybe, but, heat I think is pretty important because you can add, anyway, you needed some heat. I was surprised not to find that. But especially once we got to Chupa, I was not surprised to find that heat was absent there because it really is. It's very poor area. They don't have much of anything, and so not finding heat there was not that big of a surprise. But the truth is, it was colder than I was anticipating it to be. And so at night, it would be around 29 degrees. I know that first night. And that's not terrible if you just go out in it for a few minutes. But if you're in it for hours, that gets pretty cold. And so the first thing I discovered is that my sleeping bag is essentially suited for sleeping in here. And so it wasn't heavy enough. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and my feet were just ice cubes. And I got up and I had a towel. And so I put the towel down in the sleeping bag to help me. And I zip back up and I'm in this. I look like a pig in a blanket. And so I'm in here. I'm zipped up. And I'm into the sleeping bag up to here. And it was at this point I was reminded of something that many of you take for granted. Hair affords you a fair amount of head heat. Those of you who have full heads of hair, you don't realize how much heat your hair holds in. So clearly I'm not holding in any heat with this. And I was like, my head is just freezing. And so I wound up that night sleeping with a baseball cap on, and honestly, that's not great sleeping headwear. So anyway, my goal the next day in this town where there's not the only markets that exist or stores that exist or where you have some individuals who in the front room of their home, that they have an area that's maybe 1/3 the size or smaller of our side lobby where they've got some stuff, some wares set out there. And so in talking with David, the missionary that's there, and asking some questions, we'd found out a particular place where we thought I might be able to find a toboggan. That's what I was looking for. And so we go to this particular home where they've got this little market set up, and with the help of a translator, I don't even know, because we had to explain to our translator what a toboggan was. And so once we explained that, then he told them what we were looking for. And not surprisingly, there's not an array of options. They either have one or they don't. And it turns out they had a toboggan. And so I was able to negotiate the price on that. I bought that toboggan, and I was grateful to get that. Among other things, I thought, it's kind of neat. Now I've got something that came from this, what feels like the edge of the earth, and maybe made by somebody here. That's kind of cool. Until I'm walking away and I look inside and there's a tag that says, "Made in China." I thought, you are kidding me. I have come to the edge of the earth to buy a Chinese-made toboggan. But anyway, Chinese or Peruvian, I was still glad to have it. It made the next nights there a lot easier in terms of sleeping. The reality, though, is this. I wound up needing that, but I didn't know I was going to. I had done as best I could to prepare for that trip, but that trip, like any others, there's going to be some stuff. There's going to be some things that you encounter that you couldn't have fully prepared for, some stuff that you didn't know, some circumstances that you encountered that weren't necessarily on your radar. And so when those circumstances come up, when those needs are encountered, what exactly do you do? How do you deal with those? Last week we began a series that I'm calling Road Trip. And what we're doing is to look at the experience of the people of God as they left Egypt and head to the Promised Land. They are walking with God, going somewhere. If you're someone who has a relationship with the Lord, you too are headed somewhere. If you're one that is in relationship with the Lord, you are walking with Him, and God doesn't want you to just operate like a bump on a log. He seeks to guide you in life. There's a journey you are experiencing with God. Now, there's lots of things that you can do to prepare, things that you can learn, things that you can discover. However, you don't know exactly what the future is going to be. And as you walk with God in life, there's going to be things, there's going to be stuff that you didn't expect. And as you encounter that stuff, how do you deal with it? What is God going to do? How is He going to help you respond as you walk with Him? We see some answers to that question today in a passage that really kind of unpacks for us about how it is that God provides for us as we walk with Him. If you would look with me in your Bibles today to Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16. We're going to start with verse 4. And then we're going to drop back in around verse 14. All right, so verse 4 of Exodus 16 tells us that the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions." If you go down to verse 14, we're told when the layer of dew evaporated, there were fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, what is it? Because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts. Some of your translations may say an omer, but an omer is 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent." So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a little, some a lot. When they measured it by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. Moses said to them, "No one is to let any of it remain until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some people left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank, and therefore Moses was angry with them. Skip to verse 31. We're told the house of Israel named this substance manna. It resembled coriander seed. It was white, tasted like wafers made with honey. All right, so the people of God are walking with the Lord. Physically and metaphorically, God is not content to just once they escape Egypt, just to allow them to just kind of live and operate aimlessly. But He has directions, He has paths, He has a destination He wants to take them. The truth is the same for you and for me. As you have a relationship with the Lord, He's not content for you just to kind of operate in life, but He wants to guide you. There's places that He wants you to go, circumstances He wants you to experience, opportunities He wants you to seize. And as He guides you, there's going to be stuff like the children of Israel that you didn't necessarily either prepare for or couldn't fully prepare for. And let's face it, at this point, they're about 2.5 months having left Egypt. So Egypt is in the rearview mirror. They're following, you remember we talked about last week, they're following this cloud by day, and whatever this pillar of fire was at night, they're following this as God is guiding them towards the Promised Land. Any supplies in terms of food that they would have been able to take with them, those have long since been exhausted. And they're in a fairly barren area, so the stuff that they could survive off of the land is pretty few and far between. And so the people now are experiencing a real need, and their need is, we need stuff to eat. And what happens? God provides it for them. In that experience, what we see is a principle that I believe to be timeless for those who are walking with God. And that first principle is this: God provides in keeping with your need. As you walk with the Lord, as you follow Him, He will provide in keeping with your need. So Moses, in the verses as chapter 16 begins, he's gone to the Lord and says, hey, the people are angry, they're discouraged, they're hungry, their bellies are aching, and now they're whining and moaning. What are we going to do? And so God says, I'm going to take care of it. And so the solution is this, and we don't have anything really to compare this to, because it seems that this is the only time in the history of God's experience with people that He does something like this, where for a group of people He provides this substance that they called manna. It was very small, and as the dew would come down, so would the manna, and as the dew evaporated, there would be the manna. And every day they would be able to go out and gather some of this. And again, verse 31 gives us some descriptions. It tasted like wafers made with honey. So some sort of pastry type substance. I don't know. Krispy Kreme like? I don't know. More Dunkin'? I don't know. But something like that. I mean, all the descriptions, we can speculate to the nth degree, but all we're told is what we read in this chapter. And so God tells Moses that there would be this out there every day. And He would give, He says, let the people go out, gather each day, and gather enough for that day. The phrase literally reads this: the portion of a day in its day. And so the people were to go out, and you get some more details starting in verse 16. They were to go gather, some of your Bibles again say maybe 1 omer or 2 quarts of this substance every day for each person that was part of a household. And so you say, okay, Michael, I've got that. 2 quarts, a half gallon of manna every day is what they were supposed to get. So what does that have to do with me? Well, what I want you to see is that there is a principle that describes or communicates to us something about the work of God and how it is He provides for us as we walk with Him. And that principle, again, is this: God provides in keeping with your need. God knew that the people needed to eat. He knew they didn't have anything else. He knew, and the text describes this as a desert area, so there's not tons of berries, there's not all sorts of fruits and vegetables that just happen to be wildly growing. God knew that the people had need, and what He did is to meet that need. Now, not only does the text communicate that He did that, but it communicates the manner in which He did do this, so that each person had a sufficient amount. Not too much, not too little. So again, he told them, go out and gather the portion of a day in its day. God provided, not only to meet the need, He provided in keeping with the need, so that they had every day as much as was necessary. In terms of application for me and for you, the principle, I believe, holds true, which is, again, this: as you are walking with God, I mean, you can go to Bible studies, you can come to worship services, you can do personal Bible study, and there's all sorts of things that you can read and study where you can seek to anticipate and prepare for the future. But the truth is, as God guides you, there's going to be circumstances you encounter that were not on your radar screen, that you do not have the ability to see ahead in the future, to know that that's looming. So there's going to be all of these things that you could not prepare for, that you could not brace for. And in those moments, in those circumstances, there will be needs. As God guides you, there will be needs. But bear this in mind: the one who is guiding you knows what those needs are and will provide for you in keeping with the need. Not only in terms of nature, but in terms of amount. They needed food. He didn't give them too much. He didn't give them too little. As you experience your particular need in your particular circumstances, you follow God, He will provide not too much, not too little, not too early, and not too late. He provides consistently in keeping with the need. Where you are struggling for understanding, God will provide it. When you're struggling to get your arms around something that He said in His Word, I believe that He will make the understanding plain. He'll give enlightenment. Where you need encouragement, He will provide it. Where there are physical needs, I believe, where there are material needs, God will meet those, again, in keeping with the need. Not too much, not too little, but in keeping with the need. We have in our home, I think I might have even mentioned this before, we have a catch-all drawer. I don't know what you call your drawer. Ours is in the kitchen. It seems like that's where they typically are, a junk drawer. And in that drawer goes the stuff that doesn't really have a place anywhere else. It's kind of the odd and end stuff that you don't really want to throw away because you think, I may need this at some point in the future, but there's not enough of it to have a place, so it all just kind of gathers in that drawer. I don't understand how that drawer works, but I believe theologically how we describe it is this. It's magic. Do you need a blue button? Somehow, there's a blue button in the drawer. And whatever you need, it just seems to happen to be there. You need a 9-volt battery? Well, there's not a pack of them, but there's one. You need some scissors? They happen to be there. You need some denture adhesives? Even if you don't have dentures, somehow it's in there. Now, it doesn't make any difference what it is. Somehow, magically, it's in that drawer. And again, you never find a lot of it. But it seems like there's always just the thing that you need happens to be there. Now, obviously, I'm speaking here tongue-in-cheek, but I say that, though, to communicate the ultimate principle, which is this. And it's not magic, it's how I believe God works. That what you need, God is aware of. And what He provides is going to take care of that as you follow Him. There's going to be tons of things that you will be surprised by that you did not expect, but bear this in mind. The one who is guiding you is not surprised by one single thing. And because He's not surprised by one single thing, He's going to be able to meet your need as you follow Him. But the passage continues, and so do the principles. And that's, the second one is this. As God provides for you, not only is it in keeping with your need, but God provides, what He provides, He expects to be used. Now, this is very simple, but it's important. God told Moses, and then Moses told the people to each morning go out and gather this manna. And there were to be some exacting measurements that they were to work with, 2 quarts a day for every single person. And God told them, you go out and get this, and then He tells them not to store it, not to save it. So what did He expect them to do with it? He expected them to eat this. Which, again, is pretty simple. The food that God provides, He expects to be eaten. It communicates for us a modern-day lesson in that as God provides for you in your circumstances, what He provides, He expects to be used. God knew, not only from an ordinary living standpoint, from an ordinary life perspective, that they needed nourishment, they needed food each day, but beyond that, they're traveling. They're walking about, and so their physical needs have increased. He wants them not to be passing out. He wants them to be strong. He wants them to be able to experience and to remain on the journey, on the path that He's guiding them on. And so He provides for them, not only in keeping with their need, but because He wants them to use this, that they might be able to continue to follow Him. Listen, as you walk with God, there's going to be circumstances you encounter. Circumstances that you could not have expected, fully prepared for, or braced for. And as you experience those things, God is going to provide. And as He told them in verse 19, He says, leave none of this till morning. What God expected of His people then, He wants you to practice today, which is that what He provides, you actually use. There is no walking. For example, there is no walking with God that is not going to involve regular and consistent exposure and investment of time in His Word. It's just not going to happen. And as, for example, you read what God has said and come to discover more fully what He has made plain, He spiritually is providing nourishment for that. He's not going to give you too much, not going to give you too little. He's going to give you what you need. And what He provides for you, He expects you to do something with. He expects you to actually use it. He provides, He gives in order that you might actually use. About 18 months ago, I'd gone into a store that I've been in quite a number of times over the years. In particular, some of you guys might have been there as well. The one in Greensboro is over on now Gate City Boulevard, but Harbor Freight Tools. And they're not high quality tools, but they are low price tools, which is very handy. And so if you need something that may not last forever but won't break the bank, that's the place you want to go. And over the years I've been there right many times. And for a number of years now, anytime I would go, they would ask me if I wanted to join their, I don't know, whatever their Prime Club is or VIP Club. And it's not like Harris Teeter or Food Line MVP card where it's free. You actually have to pay to do this. It's like $20 for a year. And if you do that, you get a card, and every time you make a purchase, there's additional savings that you get. Now, sometimes it may be even, and like the first time you use it, it's like 20%. And so they've offered this to me a number of times before. And so finally, on that particular day, I decided I'm going to do this. And so I paid my $20, and on that particular day, I saved, I don't know, $1.80 on whatever it was I was buying. But I kept the card in my wallet, and I even had a little key ring thing that you could use as well. And I told myself, this is great. I've got this. This is going to save me some money. I never went back. I didn't intend to. It just kind of worked out that way. I didn't need any tools. I didn't need a tarp. I didn't need a new hammer. I didn't need anything. And so I didn't go back. And so in not going back, I didn't use this. And so as that year comes up, I might get notice in the mail, don't you want to renew? Well, no, I don't want to renew. I don't want to spend $20 to save $1.80. That didn't make any sense. And so, no, I don't want to take advantage of this. I don't want to use this. And I did not renew it because I didn't use it. And follow me in this. Because I didn't use it, I gained no benefit. And in not gaining benefit, I don't want to continue using it. Let me see if I can take that back to what we're talking about. As you walk with God in a host of different ways, in some ways that you can see, in material ways, in immaterial ways. As you walk with God, He's going to work to meet needs. And He's going to provide for you in that moment, in that circumstance, what will enable you to keep following Him, to stay on path. But here's the truth. Just because He provides it doesn't mean that you're going to use it. And if you do not use, and if you consistently do not use what God affords, over time, you get to the point where you don't see a whole lot of benefit. And if you don't see a whole lot of benefit, it makes it all the easier to decide, I'm not going to keep doing this. I'm not going to keep doing this. The God who has invited you into a relationship with Him wants you to walk with Him for the rest of your days. There's specific places that He wants to guide you to, specific circumstances He wants you to encounter, specific opportunities that He wants to open the door for you to guide you into that He might be able to use you. Now, as that stuff happens, so many things you will encounter that you couldn't have prepared for, that you couldn't have expected, that candidly you're not equipped for. But God will meet the need. But as He meets it, He expects you to use it. He expects you to use it. He wants you to use it because in doing so, you'll be able to stay on path and continuing to follow Him. But there's a final principle at work in this passage, which is this. Not only does God provide and keep in with need, not only does He provide with the expectation that you'll use, but regularly, what God provides has an expiration date. Regularly, what God provides has an expiration date. Look with me at what's going on in the passage. God told them to go out every day and get 2 quarts of manna. That's the portion of the day in its day. So they are to do that every single day, Sunday through Friday. Except Friday was to be a little different. On that day, they were to gather 4 quarts. Because on the Sabbath day, they're to rest. They're not to go out and gather. So on Friday, it's a double portion. Now, the text tells us, if you go down to verse 17, that some gathered a lot, some a little. Verse 19, though, Moses told them, it was very specific, no one is to let any of it remain until morning. And so what you gather, you are to use. You don't try to save it. God wants you, He's provided this for you. He wants you to use it. Don't try to save it. But you had some people who thought, what does Moses know? I mean, like Charlton Heston look-alike over there. What's he talking about? I don't need to pay attention to that. And so you would have some who decided, you know what, I'm going to gather 5 quarts today. Moses is not looking. I'm not going to draw attention to this. Or on a Tuesday, I'm going to gather an extra quart or maybe a few more pints, and then stick those in my pockets that people won't notice. I want to save a little extra. And so what happens? What they got because they got more than they needed. What couldn't be used, what happened to it? It spoils. It gets worms. It's nasty. And just in a day's time, it becomes spoiled and cannot be used. So what could not be used, what was not used, what happens? It goes bad. It goes bad. So what is it I'm trying to say to you? Let me see if I can communicate it this way. I remember clearly one of the first or second days of school when I was in the 7th grade. I was taking pre-algebra. And I remember her name was Mrs. Moise. She was my teacher. And I remember her saying, if you stay on this path, when you're a senior, you'll be taking calculus. And I thought, ooh, wow, I'll be taking calculus. And so, anyway, I stayed on that path. And so as a senior, I took a year's worth of calculus. Went on to college, and I took another semester of calculus. Along the way, I kept asking myself this, when in the world am I ever going to use this? But honestly, this was the thought that encouraged me. If I'm ever a dad, I will be able to do what my parents could not do. I will be able to help my children. Because as I started in the 7th grade, that was at the point my parents said, yeah, I'm done. We can't help you anymore. And I thought, I will not be that person. I will not be that person. And so I have accumulated all of this. I've got a year and a half now of calculus. I guess it's probably 4 or 5 years ago. Nancy's youngest son, Draven, was here after school one day, and he was working on his homework. And so I think he was in either 4th or 5th grade. But he was in Nancy's office just kind of quietly doing his homework. I was in my office doing my thing. Nancy buzzes me and she says, can you come up here for just a second? And so I go up there and she says, Draven's asked for my help in this and I can't figure it out. Will you help him? Of course I will. Let me take out my scientific calculator and my brilliance and I will unpack it. I will take my calculus and I will answer 4th grade math. Now, understand, among other things, we're talking about Common Core math, which is a whole different thing anyway. Anyway, I looked at it, I read it, and then I looked at it and read it. I went back and I read some of the explanations. And finally, I remember telling Nancy this, listen, I've had all this math, but I can't help a 4th grader with his math anymore. Now, that was the honest truth. Now, part of it had to do with Common Core, but it also had to do with this. We know it by cliche. If you don't use it, you lose it. You lose it. I mean, some of you have had, just relative to math, you've had legions more math than I ever have. But you might have experienced what I have as well. I have to think, so if I want to do a percent, I do it. Because the stuff that we don't use, over time, we lose it. There is spiritual application in that thought, which is this. As you walk with God, He knows what you need, and He's providing. It may be that He provides, for example, in terms of Bible knowledge and understanding, that He helps grow you in terms of truth, and that you accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. But hear me in this. If you don't use that, just because you gained it back there doesn't mean that you'll have it in the moment. If you don't use it over time, what happens? It's like it goes away. It spoils. It becomes of no benefit. Which reinforces this notion. As God provides, He expects you to use. If you're here this morning as someone who is one that says, I've got a personal relationship with the Lord. Some of you would say, man, for me, it started decades ago. And I have been, and I'm still walking with the Lord now. You can attest to this. There have been some crooks and turns that you didn't expect. There have been some surprises along the way. I hope what you can see looking back is this. As there were unexpected turns, there were no surprises to the Lord, and He met your need. What I would want you to also see is that what He provided, He wanted you to use. It's possible that you didn't use it. You accumulated knowledge, you accumulated opportunity, you accumulated whatever it is. And at some point in the future, maybe even now, you're struggling and discovering, you know what? That opportunity that was there, that door is now closed. That lesson that was learned is now forgotten. That relationship that used to be meaningful with that person has now gone by the wayside. My encouragement for you is this. As you walk with God and as He provides, use it. Don't be a hoarder. Don't just collect. Be a user. Will you bow your heads with me? This week, looking back, I hope you can see, if you're one that has a relationship with the Lord, He has sought to guide you. There are ways that He's led you, and in all likelihood, for many of you, there are surprises just this past week that you experienced. As you encounter those surprises, God sought to meet those needs, to help you deal with those circumstances. You might not have been paying attention at the time. And it may be that what God provided you didn't use. Maybe you were too dependent on other people or needing their counsel, needing their input, needing what the bank could say, what the friend would say. And there's resources that God has put on the table that so far you might have overlooked. So long as God is still providing them, will you decide today, I want to use those? I've still got some decisions to make this week, and I want to lean on Him. I want to lean into Him. Maybe you would say that you're someone that has followed the Lord for a long time. You can say, man, there's a lot of ways that God has provided for me. The truth is, there is so much that I just haven't used. I've been like a sponge that's been soaking up and soaking up and soaking up and never getting squeezed out. And I'm coming to discover that stuff I thought was there now no longer is. Maybe it's time to start making some changes where you say, what God is providing me, He wants me to do something with. Sponges do need to be to absorb, but they also need to be squeezed out. And perhaps it is that you can see opportunities that God has and is providing even in these current days that He wants to use you. Maybe you're here and we've been talking about walking with God and you don't really know fully what that's like because you've never begun a relationship with Him. Will you allow today to be the day where you, if you don't begin it, at least find out how you can begin it? In just a moment, we're going to have a time where people can respond, and this is not the only time you can do this, but it is a good opportunity. If you want perhaps to kneel at this altar and just pray to God, maybe you want to pray where you are, but maybe if you want just to kneel, you can do that. If you want me or someone else to pray with you, we'll do that. You want to find out how it is that you can begin to follow Jesus? You can see me afterwards, but you can see me now. We can begin that conversation. I just believe that God speaks, that God guides. And I believe that even now He's providing what you need, which is an opportunity to make choices. My prayer is you'll choose wisely. Father, I pray as you have and you are speaking, that we will follow your lead, and that as you are giving us this opportunity to make decisions for our good and for your pleasure, God will follow you. We commit this time of decision to you in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to ask if you would to stand as our praise team leads us in the hymn of invitation.